The train hissed like a dying snake, steam curling into the dry Montana sky as Eleanor stepped off the last carriage. Her boots hit the platform with a quiet thud, the worn leather carrying the weight of someone who had never really been wanted anywhere. She held a single suitcase in her gloved hand. The fingers inside trembled, half from nerves, half from the bite of cold wind. The hem of her burgundy traveling dress flapped gently, its seams let out by a seamstress who had not asked why, just nodded kindly and said, "You'll look beautiful, dear." That had been in Ohio 2 weeks ago. Now she stood in a town called Gray Hollow, where the streets were more dust than road, and the people more shadows than company. Her heart pounded as she scanned the tiny crowd at the station. She recognized him from the photograph. Ethan Collins, tall, blonde, handsome in a rugged way, a rancher, widower, 34, the man who had answered her mail-order bride letter. He looked at her and frowned. No greeting, no smile, just that pause, that narrowing of his eyes as they fell to her waist, her face, her chest. He said nothing, just turned and walked away. "Mr. Collins," she called, voice thin and cracking. He stopped. I, I'm Eleanor Harper, from Ohio." He turned halfway, his jaw tight. "You weren't what I expected." Her breath caught. "I wrote everything truthfully," she said, barely louder than the wind. "Maybe, but your photo—" He didn't finish, just gave her a once-over. "I can't take you in." "I traveled for 2 weeks," she whispered. "I have no one." "That's not my fault," he snapped. "Should have told me you were bigger." She flinched like he'd slapped her. He climbed into his wagon. The horses snorted and stomped as he took the reins. "Go home," he said. "This was a mistake." Then he was gone. Eleanor stood frozen, her body shaking not from cold now, but from shame. She could feel the eyes of strangers on her. No one spoke. No one offered help. She didn't cry, not then, but she wanted to disappear. The station master, an older man with a kind face, cleared his throat and stepped closer. "Ma'am," he said, voice gentle, "we've got a spare cot at the back of the depot. Ain't much, but it's warm. You're welcome to stay a day or two." She nodded, unable to speak. That night, Eleanor sat on the thin mattress with her suitcase at her feet. She opened it slowly, pulling out the only picture she had of her mother, then her letter, the one she had sent to Ethan, folded and smoothed so many times it was nearly see-through at the creases. "I don't expect a man to fall in love at first sight," she had written. "I only hope to be seen for what's inside, to be spoken to kindly, to laugh over small things, and maybe, if the Lord is kind, to be loved a little." She stared at those words until her vision blurred. Too fat. She'd been called worse. By boys in town, by relatives, even by her late father, whose cold disapproval followed her like a shadow. But this time, it cut deeper, because this time she had hoped, had. The next morning, Eleanor helped the station master's wife with breakfast. The woman, Martha, didn't ask why she was there, just showed her how to mix the flour right for biscuits and how to keep the fire going without smothering it. "You've got hands made for home," Martha said as they worked. "Steady, strong." Eleanor only smiled faintly. Later that day, she stepped outside to get some air. That's when she saw him. He stood near the horse post, his back to her, loading supplies onto a wagon. He moved with the ease of someone used to hard work, his coat dusted with road and sun. When he turned, their eyes met. He was no Ethan Collins, dark-haired, darker-skinned, with eyes the color of pine bark and a crooked smile forming slowly, like it wasn't sure if it had permission. "You lost?" he asked, his voice warm. She blinked. "Number just getting air." He nodded. "Good. Fresh air's a rare kindness in this place." Then he tipped his hat and walked off without another word. She watched him go, something strange blooming in her chest, like the first hint of spring after a long, cruel winter. She didn't know his name. Not yet. But something told her, deep down, this wasn't the end. The next time she saw him, he was tending to a lame mare near the blacksmith's. His coat was slung over a fence post, sleeves rolled up, arms dusted in sweat and grit. Eleanor hadn't meant to stop. She was on her way to the general store, walking with her head down as usual, trying to avoid any more curious or pitying stares. But there he was, gentle hands, soft voice, soothing the horse like it was a child instead of a beast with cracked hooves and a weary soul. "You're the woman who came in on the train," he said without looking up. Eleanor hesitated. "Yes." He offered a smile, not pitying, just human. "Ethan Collins was a fool." Her breath caught. "You know about that?" He nodded, still working on the mare's leg. "Small town. Word spreads faster than dust here." "Then you probably heard why," she said quietly. "I heard what he said," he replied, finally glancing up at her. "Didn't hear what you did to deserve it." "I existed," she muttered, the bitterness surprising even herself. He stood then, brushing his hands clean on a rag and walking toward her slowly. "You got a name?" "Eleanor." "I'm Thomas. Thomas Ward." They shook hands. His grip was firm, warm, not lingering, not sizing her up. Just real. "You staying in town?" he asked. "For now." He nodded. "Well, or if you're ever tired of pity looks and dry biscuits, I make a mean stew out at my place. Only catch is you'd have to ride a horse again." She almost laughed. "Are you inviting me to dinner?" "Reckon I am." She looked away, unsure. "Why?" Thomas shrugged. "Because you look like someone who hasn't been asked in a while." Eleanor didn't answer right away. Her chest tightened. The last time a man asked her anything with kindness in his voice was, well, never really. "I'll think about it," she said finally. He tipped his hat again. "That's fair." 2 days later, she knocked on his door. His homestead lay 3 miles out of town, tucked between cottonwood trees and the lazy bend of a river. It wasn't much, just a cabin, a shed, a few chickens, but it was quiet and smelled of cedar and wood smoke. "You came," he said, genuinely surprised. "You said stew," she replied, "and I got tired of biscuits." That earned a chuckle from him. The inside of his home was simple but clean. Books stacked in corners, a carved chessboard sitting unfinished on a table. It felt like a place where someone lived, not just survived. As they ate, she learned little things about him. That he was raised by his grandmother, that he used to be a carpenter before the war, that he liked rainstorms and hated coffee. He didn't ask about her past. He just let her talk when she wanted and let the silence sit easy when she didn't. "You cook like someone who's lived alone too long," she teased. "You eat like someone who's forgotten how," he countered. Their eyes met. She looked away first, but not with shame, with something closer to fear of what she was feeling. "People here," she said after a long pause, "they look at me like I'm broken, or worse, like I deserve to be." Thomas leaned forward. "You ain't either. You don't even know me." "I don't have to." He shrugged. "You carry yourself like someone who's had to be strong for too long. That kind of weight leaves marks. I've seen it in soldiers and mothers and children, but never in someone who gave up." She stared at him, throat tight. No one had ever said something like that to her. Not ever. Later, when she stood to leave, he walked her outside and offered her a spare shawl for the chill. "I'll be back in town tomorrow," he said. "Can I walk you to the store?" Some of the folks still talk like they were raised in a barn. She raised an eyebrow. "You want to be seen walking next to me?" "I don't much care what they see," he said. "I care what you feel." Eleanor looked down at her boots. They were scuffed, old, like her. But suddenly they didn't seem like such a shameful thing to wear. She nodded. "All right." The next morning, the whispers started the moment they stepped into the general store together. "She's still here? Is that Thomas Ward with her? Didn't Collins say she lied to him?" Thomas ignored them. He held the door open, let her take her time, paid for her flour when she realized she'd forgotten her coin purse. At one point, Collins himself appeared. He sneered as he passed. "Didn't know you liked heavy loads, Ward," he muttered under his breath. Thomas didn't even blink. He stepped between Eleanor and the man, calm as a stone. "You didn't know how to treat her," he said, "so now you don't get to talk to her. Or about her." Collins scoffed but didn't speak again. Eleanor stared at Thomas, stunned. "You didn't have to do that." "I know. Why did you?" "Because what you weigh has nothing to do with what you're worth," he said softly, "and because someone needed to say it." Eleanor felt something crack open in her chest, like a locked door left untouched for years. She wasn't sure what to do with it yet. But for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like hiding. A week passed, then another, and every morning Eleanor found herself waking with the same breathless surprise. She was still here, not shipped back to her father in shame, not abandoned, not ridiculed. She was living in Dustwood as if she belonged, because she did. Each day, she and Thomas spent time together, sometimes talking, sometimes just working side by side. They mended fences, gathered firewood, shared meals that slowly began to feel less like charity and more like ritual. There was a quiet rhythm to their life, a growing warmth neither of them dared to name. Until one evening after supper, when the sun dipped low behind the hills and painted everything in shades of honey and gold, Thomas set his fork down and looked at her with that calm, unreadable expression she had come to know. "I have something to ask," he said. Eleanor's heart stuttered. "All right." He stood and walked to a small drawer in the corner. From it, he pulled a worn leather pouch, the kind used to hold bullets or coins. Instead, he opened it and took out a simple silver ring, scuffed, a little bent, but polished clean. "It was my grandmother's," he said. "She wore it through war, famine, and heartbreak. Said it reminded her that hands are meant for holding, not hurting." Eleanor couldn't breathe. "I don't want to rush you," he said softly. "And I know life's kicked you hard, maybe harder than most. But if you're still thinking about leaving town, I hope you don't." She stared at him, eyes wide. "Are you asking me to stay?" Silence. It stretched long and thick between them, filled with ghosts of doubt, of laughter long buried, of every insult she'd swallowed over the years. She glanced down at her hands, strong, worn, calloused from work. She remembered Colin's laughter, the way his eyes had skimmed over her like she was livestock, his cruel grin when he turned away. And then she looked at Thomas, the man who had never once flinched at her size, her scars, her silence. She blinked back tears. "I'm not who I used to be," she whispered. "I'm not soft or gentle or easy to love." Thomas stepped forward and took her hand, his thumb brushing over the back of her knuckles. "I don't want soft," he said. "I want real." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "What if they talk? What if they say you settled?" He smiled, a slow, crooked thing that made her chest ache. "Then let them talk. We'll give them something worth whispering about." The wedding was small, just the preacher, two witnesses, and a patch of wildflowers behind Thomas's cabin. Eleanor wore a pale blue dress that fit too tightly at the arms and was far too plain for what it meant. But when she stepped outside, Thomas looked at her like she was the only thing that had ever mattered. "I never dreamed of this," she whispered, voice shaking. "Not really. I used to write letters to strangers because I didn't think anyone close would ever want me. I never answered those letters," he replied gently, "because I was too far away to read them." Eleanor laughed through tears. "You ready?" he asked, offering his arm. She took it without hesitation. Time passed as it does. The whispers never stopped completely, but they changed. "She married him? She's still here?" She must have done something right after all. But Eleanor didn't hear them the same anymore. Not since she'd realized something vital. People will always measure others by their own broken rulers. And she had stopped letting strangers take her worth into their hands. She measured herself, in the sweat of her brow as she built a garden out of dust, in the laugh that came more freely each day, in the way Thomas held her, not with desperation, not with shame, but with quiet reverence, and in the small, subtle moment when she passed a mirror one morning, caught a glimpse of herself, and smiled, not out of vanity, but out of recognition. There she was, Eleanor, whole. Some months later, when a new train rolled into Dustwood carrying a fresh line of mail-order brides, Eleanor stood on the platform watching them disembark, nervous, clutching bonnets and carpet bags, eyes scanning the crowd with hope and dread. One of them, a round-faced girl no older than 20, approached Eleanor shyly. "Ma'am," she asked, "is it true that you were once sent back?" Eleanor smiled, a dimple creasing her cheek. "It's true," she said, "and now I run the dress shop and own part of the mercantile." The girl's eyes widened. "What happened?" Eleanor thought of Thomas, of stew and laughter and wildflower vows. "Someone saw me, and I saw myself. She touched the girl's hand. If anyone tells you your body makes you unworthy of love, know they're lying. Love isn't about earning. It's about recognizing. The girl nodded, her eyes misty. Eleanor turned and walked home, dust curling behind her boots, heart light. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. The world had once tried to tell her she was too much, too wide, too loud, too unwanted. And now? Now she had a man who loved her, a home that welcomed her, and a self that no one could ever throw away again.